What's up, Bulldogs? All right, I got a question here about frame control. This is an interesting one. Someone said here, hey John, recently saw your video. It's awesome to know you're back and making videos. Your content is very empowering and helping people take responsibility instead of blaming others. Thank you. I appreciate that. He said here, I wonder if you can make some more videos on frame control and how to handle difficult people. So first of all, let's talk about what is frame control in general, and then we can kind of get into this idea of how do you deal with people that are difficult or trying to punk you or manipulate you. So frame control is this concept, it's this idea that whenever two people have an interaction, that there are two colliding frames, right? So a frame is my view of the world. It is what I'm saying that things are, right? So if I say that this is a coffee mug, that's my frame. It's for coffee. Now you might have a different frame and say, oh, this is a cup. Or you might say, okay, this is a weapon that you hit people over the head with. That's a different frame. Those are different frames. Now, the most powerful frame wins. So if I say this is a coffee mug and I'm like, hey, I put coffee in this is a coffee mug, and you think it's a weapon to hit people over the head with, one of us is gonna dominate. We're gonna have a dominating frame, and the other person is gonna go into that frame. Because frame is just a way of looking at the world. So now we get into the details of what happens when these frames collide. When people come into contact with each other, there is, like I said, a dominant frame. And this applies to a lot of life. You know, if you go out to a bar or something and you're talking to some girls, if you come in with this frame that you're the coolest guy that's ever existed on this damn planet, when you go into an interaction with a woman, if she seems to act in a negative way towards you, you're not even interpreting that. You're not even seeing that's her frame. Her frame might be, oh, this creep is bothering me, but you're not buying into that frame at all. You're dismissing that frame. In fact, when she says something like that, if you engage that frame, you're starting to come into that reality, right? So let's say that you go up to a girl and you're like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And she's like, hey, who are you? Why are you so close to me? And then you start to say, oh, I'm actually a cool guy. You're like, oh, wow, I didn't mean to do that. There's a misunderstanding here. Anything that you're saying that's responding to that, you're now getting into her frame because she's created this new frame, which is that you're a creep and you're bothering me, and you're believing it because you're responding to it. You don't buy into that frame because you don't even pay any attention to it, right? So if you respond with her saying something negative to you with almost just not even hearing it or just interpreting it as something good because it's in your frame, like if your frame is every woman loves you, you're the most awesome guy in the world, then your response is going to be like, you're just going to carry on like she didn't even say that, or you're going to maybe look at her like she's a little crazy, and then you're going to carry on. And that is powerful. Now, it doesn't absolutely mean that she's going to come into that frame, but you're not going to get into her frame, and there might be some compromised frame in between, but you have a very high chance of her falling into that, especially the more that you keep that up. Really persuasive people, really charismatic people are able to pull you into their frame, even when it's something that you didn't agree with in the first place. So if we talk about how do you handle difficult people and people who try to punk you or manipulate you, the answer is you don't buy into their frame. If someone is being difficult, you just act like they're not difficult because they want to have this frame of being an antagonist to you, right? So I'm not going to allow that negativity. I'm not going to allow someone that's being difficult to stop me. I'm just going to plow through that and keep talking and keep producing my frame. My frame is that you like me. And so no matter what you're feeding me, that's the opposite of that. I'm going to continue to operate in that frame. And so that's kind of the most powerful way to think, is to think that how can I interpret this in a way that coincides with my frame instead of clashes with my frame? Because as soon as I try to fight someone else's frame, they've won. I'm being sucked into that frame, right? So you can apply this with manipulation as well, right? So let someone trying to manipulate you, the most powerful thing you can do is to set a boundary. And you set the boundary by stating what you will do in response to an action that they take. So if you choose to do this, this is what I'm going to do, but I'm not angry, I'm not upset, I'm just creating this boundary. Let's say that someone's trying to punk you or they're trying to manipulate you in some way. You can recognize what's going on and you can see that, but you have to ignore that and pretend like you don't see that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So here's a good example. There was a book that my daughter was reading last night on our daily personal development reading time. And she was talking about the book, and there's something about this, about something that related to her life. I knew that she was glossing over this thing and ignoring this thing and not really treating it as what the actual truth was. And so instead of me directly conflicting with her frame and then buying into her frame by addressing that specifically, I just asked her some questions, assuming that she knew knew the answer, assuming that the thing that I was telling her, my frame, that she already agreed with it. And so by acting that way, it brought her into my frame and it stopped her from what she was trying to do in that situation. So when you've got someone that's trying to manipulate you, when you've got someone that's trying to punk you, whatever it is, always think about, how can I incorporate this into my frame? It's almost like improv, right? In improv, they say yes and. And so that's what you got to do. It's sort of a yes and. If you directly try to conflict against someone's frame, you're buying into it. So it's almost like you're shining them on. It's almost like when someone's saying something, you're saying, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. However, and, right, you're adding that to it. So let's say that someone comes up to you and says something negative. They're like, that's a goofy shirt you got. What is their frame, right? If we were to dissect this. And again, I've got some more lessons in the Bulldog Mindset membership. If you haven't checked that out, you can click the link down below. But what is their frame? It's not that your shirt is goofy. That's not what their frame is. Their frame is that you are goofy. Their frame is that you're lesser. Their frame is that you are a person who's weaker than them. That's what their frame is. And that you have a low self-confidence and that you're vulnerable to this sort of attack. That's what their frame is. And they're trying to prove that frame by what they're saying. And if you respond to that and defend yourself and say, your shirt is goofy or whatever, like, no, it's not. Now you've bought into their frame because that's what they're trying to accomplish there. And they're trying to punk you. So how do you respond to that? Well, what is your frame? Your frame is, I'm a cool guy. I wear awesome clothes. And even if they're not, I like them. And I don't really care what anyone else thinks about it. And I'm a likable guy and everyone likes me and no one would want to punk me or treat me poorly. Maybe that's your frame. How does that frame respond to that? Well, it could just ignore it completely. Just smile. It could just misinterpret that. It could be like, oh, you noticed my shirt. You like my shirt. Okay. It has to be convincing though, because you have to really believe this. Or maybe like you're taking it to that psychological 3D chess where you're like, okay, this person is trying to manipulate me and they're trying to punk me, but it's coming from their own insecurity because they need to feel this. So then you recognize that and then you respond in a way that's empathetic towards this person. That's like, oh, wow, are you having a rough day? It feels like you're having a rough day. Like forget about the shirt. What's going on with you today? Something like that. And maybe they're still fighting it. But if you keep on persisting in that, because you know what the real truth is, because your frame is the more powerful frame, they're eventually going to buckle to that frame and they're going to break down. You can reach them through that because you know that your frame is more powerful. Their frame will eventually collapse to that kind of a dominant frame. So the big idea here with frame control and understanding how this works is that you just have to know that whatever your frame is, whatever that you're holding up as your image, that your frame is that is reality, and anything that is denying that or that is contrary to that, you are denying. You're not letting it in. You're not even processing that. You're either rejecting it completely or you're judoing it and turning it into something that's positive towards you or towards your frame. It takes some practice. It's a little bit complicated to do that, but if you start doing that, you'll find that it will work and people will not be able to manipulate you. And you won't even care, because as long as you're strong in your frame, and that's really the thing to think about, is like, just be in your frame. Don't let people take you out of your frame. And if you constantly are just operating from your frame, you don't even have to try and judo these things. It's going to automatically happen, and people will start to adapt to your frame. They'll start to fall into it. If you want some help with all this stuff, I've got lessons in the Bulldog Mindset membership. Click the link down below to check it out, and I'll see you tomorrow.